Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Empowera podcast. We have a guest here. Who are you? Where are you coming to us from?
Well, I'm Ozone J.C. Konen III, a social worker, advocate, community organizer based in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I've spent over a decade working in crisis intervention, homeless services, and empowerment initiatives.
Wow. And if you haven't checked out Ozone's other episode, it's on the Yonya Health podcast. Again, you can go to the launchpad for Empowera and go ahead and check 2024. Check that out. Shared also some other information, different perspective too. We even connected a little bit before. So I'm going to go ahead and let you, Ozone, if we can start off here. For those who don't know, Empowera Podcast, what is it? It's a podcast run by healthcare professionals, for healthcare professionals, and general communities at large, with goals such as increasing transparency within the healthcare field and awareness in all different areas, whether it's billing, the overall integrity, and just to have different perspective with those individuals and organizations that may often go unheard. We're brought back here too by our sponsors, and we're going to go over those here in a little bit. But I wanted to start off here, if you wanted to, Ozone, with the thank you and acknowledgement part of the overall episode. If there's any individuals or organizations that make a true difference in your life that you'd like to acknowledge and bring here to the light.
Absolutely. I would like to thank Dr. Tina Thomas for her guidance and wisdom along this path that I'm on currently. I now have the LMSW of Louisiana to the Louisiana Board of Social Work Examiners and the National Association of Social Workers. I just recently graduated from Tulane University School of Social Work with my MSW, but I have a lot of experience with policy, crisis response, and social justice work for about 10 years previous to getting my degree. I'd like to thank Unity of Greater New Orleans for everything they helped me with along the way as well, because they were a key part of me doing this. I would like to thank everyone that's been supportive, really, even if they weren't supportive, they were supportive in my journey. And so I'd like to thank everybody that's ever been part of my life in any way, shape, or form, really.
Wow. And the difference in perspective of being able to come back here and see from the podcast before and now, and even you mentioned too, you listened just previously as well to the previous podcast, just to see your distinctions and the overall in growth, good, bad, or indifferent as to what it is. It is what you know, and you shared that, and I appreciate that raw share. And shout out to those organizations that you also did mention. It makes a true difference in the world, and I'm just really, I have to ask myself, Brett, is there a part of the podcast where you feel empowered? And I say, at this point, I'd definitely say, Ozone, yes, you truly do make me feel empowered. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I don't know if I shouted out to Tulane, but shout out to Tulane School of Social Work again for the support and everything, the scholarships that were given to me so that I could go forward in my life and be a productive member of our community. And to my profit, which is All Flags International, which is basically a humanitarian initiative for everyone. It's not divisible by sex or ages or cultures or any of those things. I like to call it trinary, which is above non-binary. It's where we all look at each other equally and we don't see division anymore, and we just talk to each other in that way. So all the our ideas and thoughts of what people really want to say.
Wow.
All Flags International.
All Flags International. All right. God.
I spoke to my grandmother who had All Flags International, which was a ship channeling company based in New Orleans years ago.
Okay.
Who was from Honduras. And so she came over here in her 30s, I think it was, and started her own businesses and was very successful in contributing member to our culture, to our communities in many ways. And so she raised me when I was a kid with my parents. And so I've always looked at her as another mother. And so out of respect, she died very, very young. I think she was 63 from bone cancer, unexpectedly. Mm-hmm. And so to to bring that essence of her spirit back into things with my life, I said, well, what says more than everyone than All Flags International? So I didn't come up with that. I stole it from my grandmother from Honduras, but I guess by what do you call it? When you inherency, I have the right to utilize it, and so that's why I decided, because it works in both ways.
Yeah, and what I get to is that you were truly inspired by not only the name, not just the way that it appeared, but the overall experience you had with them in your life, to the point where, in what better way would you like to, what's the term here, to acknowledge their overall existence, and then to literally use that within the name, and then to share it whenever anyone is curious. Well, even at this time. So, wow. All right, well, I wanted to go ahead and here, and we're going to go into the question at large, and that is, what, in your opinion, Ozone, is happening in healthcare? What, in your opinion, is happening within health and wellness? And in whatever way, shape, or form, we also have the emphasis here, moving forward, that we are looking at gratitude and self-expression as well, in whatever way that it occurs, and that could be even through answering this very question. So I'm going to go ahead and give it over here to you, and thank you again for being here. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I guess, for the personal connection on this topic, I mean, healthcare and wellness is holistic. Being a mental health professional, we have to look at everything from a holistic perspective, especially social work, because we're the broader, definitive, I guess you would say, on different subjects, where we have to take those things into account more so than what you would typically see from a normal mental health professional. So it's anyway, but I've seen firsthand how the system can both uplift and fail people. And my goal has always been to bridge those gaps in a way that empowers individuals rather than just managing and enabling them to continue. The cost on recidivism, on just going with what's the standard acceptability thing at the time based on whatever it may be, is not working holistically, not for our communities, not for our country, and not for the world. And so we have to start with ourselves. Healthcare, wellness, and the patient experience should really be about true care, not just things like crisis management. Right now we have a system that too often waits for people to break before offering any help, rather than investing in preventative, holistic, and community-driven solutions that empower people before they reach a breaking point. If you do maintenance on a car, it doesn't break down so much.
Yeah.
Or if you don't do maintenance, eventually everything breaks down at the same time and the car's useless. Well, then we're only going to have you can only have a finite amount of life in this form. And so that's sometimes it's subjective based on people's wants and desires, but they're also perspectives. And so sometimes changing those perspectives change desires and change your whole life. So the integrity in healthcare means to stop treating people like cases to be managed and start seeing them as humans with agency. It means breaking down barriers to access, prioritizing trauma-informed and harm reduction models that ensure not just a privilege, but a right. The question is, does the system support real healing? And right now, too often the answer is no, but that doesn't mean we can't change it. The power to reshape healthcare is in our hands, and it starts with empowering people, communities, and the professionals within it to create solutions that actually work. I know they teach about evidence-based practices, but if the same things are accepted because they're accepted that way, does it make them right, or does it make them what the population does at the moment? So it makes a lot harder for experimental things or new ways of thinking to come in because, well, this is how it's always been, but look at the state we're in. So do we want to continue that state, or do we want to figure out a change? And that's kind of where, right now we don't really have that. We don't have equal access based on human need instead of bureaucracy. When a non-medical professional is deciding at the top end who gets paid and what gets paid and who's going to cover what, that doesn't make any sense, because this person doesn't have the the same understandings and goals, the bottom line, the stakeholders. Well, if the stakeholders are there for capitalistic gain, then they're not about helping the people. It's what's most profitable and what's the least cost that we're going to put out. So you see a lot of, all we can do is stabilize, we can triage, but we can't really treat you for that. You have to go see this person, and that person's out of our reach because we don't have the means, or that person lives in another state because that practice is experimental. But yet these people are living a better quality of life because they have access and knowledge of these things.
No, and you're putting out a lot there in the own overall integrity declaration here, because this is what it is you're up against now that you have finally done the work and become a new professional. And you see this through this, as you said it, and even in your the term you used, and I'm not always here for he said, she said, that's going to be over linguistics, but I think it was best expressed was the term lens. Your lens has been changed. And to see it even firsthand now on not just the integrity, but how things are and how it works, and that you even within the system know how that is. So then if you know, who's to say that they don't know? And of course we still have profit and loss. That's how things are recorded among IRS standard, and I get that. I totally do. There are also still nonprofit organizations that exist, and a majority of them since the 80s have a portion of them, aside from religious and from educational, have been health and wellness parts of the sector. Now, mind you, it's amazing that only 2% of the GDP was a part of all of that. This is something previous statistic, but even like you said now, all it takes now, especially with the use of technology, is whatever it is we say, even to the integrity to the point where of our own integrity is based upon the increased availability of technology now to people, where they can use Dr. Google, or they can, beyond Dr. Google now, use Dr. GPT and ask these clarifying questions, the follow-ups, the things that people wanted to be able to know. But once the person left, and I'd seen it time and time again, all the questions would flood out of the patient's head after the doctor or provider left. And then it's left to social work or another ancillary. We call ourselves ancillary, but we're still part of the team. Then besides just being the main provider, I would say. If there is the main provider with main risk, great. I am not that person. So I will have that distinction. I will be the ancillary team if that's the distinction. But and to see that, because that's still choice. And that influences, it was in the past podcast I was recording, which will drop around with this one too, is if the watchmen watch us, who watches the watchman? And I know we can speak of metaphorically, we can speak in phrases and whatnot, but there's still the integrity too of the provider, because there is the phrase, and even I think it's older than time, you can't take care of others until you take care of yourself, or at least start into looking into that, and again, that's all circumstantial and whatnot, but
well, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
What do you get from that?
I have nothing against the organizations or the nonprofits or anybody.
No, absolutely not.
That has done any good at the time like, in other words, like, everyone does what they do passionately because they actually think that it's the best thing for everyone at the time, place, and space. Well, as time goes on, we realize that some of these things may be based on things that were misunderstood or misprojected by our societies. And just because that's the tradition, whatever that is, doesn't mean that's the best for everyone. And that's where we fail to recognize. We're so caught up in what we know and what we have, that in a separatist society where we're basically rewarded on individual gains and what we have as far as materialistic possessions most of the time, you have nothing but division. If you want people to come together, you have to come back together as a people, not as I have a this and you have a that. There's no hierarchy. Like, that's the imperialisticness of society that's been basically colonized from every in history throughout every society. They were conquered and made to think this way. That's why these religions are based on these thoughts and these religions. But there were other societies that were overtaken, robbed, beaten, whatever they did at the time. I mean, we can go through history and talk about the negativity, or let's focus on what we can do today instead of being that way, because that's all we know. Let's have a little bit of cultural humility and realize that, okay, well, maybe I am wrong. So if I study other cultures and realize that they have a better this or that, why don't we take the best of everything and come up with something that's truly equitable, diversity, and inclusion? That means everybody and you. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants change. Everybody talks about change. They want everybody else to change. They just don't want to change themselves.
Yes.
Because they're content with what they have or what they feel or what they think. but that's because they're thinking about themselves
instead
or
of the
their immediate
majority in
parents.
this case,
They're
right?
not thinking about, does this affect everyone in the world, and do I care?
Yeah.
Do I care? That's the big question. Do I care? Ask yourself that. Do I care? Because if you do, then you'll listen. If not, you won't listen to anything unless it's your opinion.
And to keep that open-mindedness, because they'll have their time too. I've said that to patients before, and I've had a nurse say that prior when I was a CNA, was when the patient either felt bad about having to use us as staff when they needed us literally because of their health and condition. But it was, we'll all have our own time, we will. And in good, bad, or indifferent,
Right.
for us, it is what it is. And at the same time, if it's the integrity for them, because I know a hardworking nurse. I'm not going to say who they are, but they had their own experience within the healthcare system, and they had to wait on a call light for over an hour. They even timed it. They even emailed back about it. And that's like the watchman watching. Like, if it's almost like trying to go and buy ice cream at an ice cream stand, and then you go there and it's like, then you have the worst experience, even though you're the one who gave everybody else the best experience, So, and again, there's perspective too, and I get that. But even then too, if we have to use the United States as a basis too, or whatnot, aside from imperialism, is because we do have that in the background. That's how, literally where we came from too. So to see the lens outside of that, which I think was the other part, is we the people, so it was just more than one person making decisions. I found this out a little bit ago. Did you know that George Washington wanted to be addressed by His Mightiness?
No.
Aren't you glad we had more than one person in charge? Aren't you glad? I am glad, and I can see what happened as a consensus of we the people, because that's not the way that we do it today. And we don't have a king.
I like to hear that a lot.
Yeah.
It says we the people, not I the people.
Correct. Right. And any distinction, therefore, of, in my opinion, and I'm not in the judicial system, but there is the term treason. And of course, that's used indefinitely and wrong, but at the same time, too, if that's literally what it is, then any violation of it is literally what I opinion is not lawful, even though there is like the living law that they have existing too, like, which is the reason why you have to have a jury of peers, because it may be a circumstance that's beyond what it is that's pre-existing, and they need literally we the people again. See, it's the whole cycle over and over and over and over again. It's just a bunch decided to get together and write the foundation. But I think one of the best things that was written into any of the documents in the United States, and again, I'm here to over-glorify it, was that they knew what they didn't know, and they left that in there knowing that it would not be perfect, that it would not be whole, and that they would set it up as a system so that if what it is that they put in place was not successful, that they could look at implementing other measures. And that's what I think is one of the most beautiful things. So, and it's the things to be considered. I mean, even to the point where you had the 18th amendment for the prohibition of alcohol. And then you had a bunch of methanol poisoning because, again, like you had mentioned with psychedelics and other drugs in our previous discussion. I'm not going to go totally in depth. You can share what you'd like to, but I do want to talk about that is then being able to test and be able to see it, because I feel it's in no way, shape, or form than the methanol poisoning that happened prior with Prohibition. But then what did they end up doing with the law then later? They had the 21st Amendment, again, not perfect, progress, not perfection, went back, changed things up, and then we allowed people to have choice, and then to be able to take it on. And what's even more interesting is if they were to include this in our history books, which they didn't, in my opinion, and do your own research, folks, is in ancient Greece, the actual ingredients, because they didn't have beer, were for wine, and it was literally to water it down. That's what the directions were. And you were considered mad if you were to drink it straight. So that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time, but that's even culturally then what it is they said, and it was literally known. It was known amongst the people, amongst the people at the time of that culture. But I'm glad you touched upon different cultures throughout history and the way things are, and there's even the phrase that, history has been written by the victors. So, it's to say, like, go ahead and still do your own research regardless of this. Again, this podcast, too, is no substitute.
It's interesting that you say the Greeks because,
Yes.
You say water it down, but, they say in alcohol harm reduction that if you are to drink a glass of water in between each alcoholic beverage,
yes,
that you will stay hydrated and you will not get dehydrated, which is the hangover that people experience.
Yeah, right.
So even just putting 50% water would in and of itself do what is recommended by harm reduction professionals all over the place as far as hydrating one's body, since we're made out of predominantly water.
Mm-hmm.
And we need that in our systems holistically in order to clean out and function properly.
Yeah, and the ancient Greeks...
we under-oxygenate and underwater ourselves, then we're not getting there's O in H2O. I mean,
No, I get that. And the other part was that wasn't the only thing that was in their wine back then. There was other things. They just called it wine. That was it. They just called it wine. But there's other substances that were in there that even the Bavarian Act of 1516, which came about too, prohibited the use of mushrooms in beer. And that's been around a long time. The purity laws for German beer. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a whole other side discussion too. But again, still culture and a perspective of an alternative therapy that could be looked at and researched in conjunction with pre-existing. I think that would be what would be the formation of Eastern and Western medicine, and I think people have probably talked about that since the dawn of time. They've been like, why? And I can only imagine what the conversations were like. But
well, true. And another side podcast would be to talk about resonant frequency theory and how the tuning system of music, and the Greeks believed in a system called the modes, which are based off the 432 system, which actually evoked emotion. So each mode, which is like C to C, D to D, E to E, basically going up to D to G with no black keys, is the spatial differentiation mode. And so each one of those would make you feel a different way. And so that's how people would get in harmony with their emotions, would be to listen to music and to have these guided, basically therapy sessions that they didn't realize they were going through at the time. Anyway, whole nother podcast.
But I still think that there is. Work. Well, no, but you're up to something. But let's keep. We'll go ahead and we'll pivot back to social work. Yes, go right ahead. Love it. We
have a lot of dedicated professionals in our systems. I think we have a lot of harm reduction approaches, and I think we have a lot of new trauma informed models that all need to be really embraced right now. As far as integrity, empowerment over the gatekeeping, making services more peer-led and client-centered. As a disaster recovery leader, if I'm going to go into someone else's culture, it's not for me to decide what's best for them. It's to go in and ask them, what do you need? How can I help you? What can we do to restore you to your baseline function? And then we can discuss improvements if you choose. That's self-determination. We take away that from people, and we think we know better because we know, but that's our egos getting in the way, right? Like with me, with All Flags that we talked about, I want to really is focusing on holistic wellness, community-based services, and harm reduction, like we talked about. Legalizing drugs would be, in an essence, harm reduction. It's not abstinence, but it's controlling everything to minimize the problematic things that go along with the usage of, like overusage, death, misuse, whatever it may be.
Purity, all of them,
medication, right? They're self-medicating, which leads to certain behaviors and patterns that they inevitably can't get away from because society won't let them. Some of the most intellectual people are not credible because of their pasts, because of their presence. Use is up to the person. That is subjective. People should be allowed to explore what's available in life. That's what life is. It's all about feelings, emotions, good, bad. They're subjective, right? But they teach us things. And if we educated people properly, then they wouldn't misuse the wrong thing for the wrong things. That's all. It would be like, I don't know. There's more harm in drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes and eating sugar, but those are the three, and caffeine. Those are the four most addictive things in the world, but yet those are legal, and so we're okay with them because somebody's making money off of it, not us, but somebody.
And the narrative, and the narratives are changing now. Even and the interesting part is that these are educated minds, and you're an educated. And even the ones that aren't. I'm glad to have those, and I'm not trying to put them down because those are their own personal experiences, and they'll outnumber the educated individuals, beyond measure. So, but the interesting part is, I'm glad you're at least keeping that focus point. Is that people will still make the choices that they will in today's world. People will still, I've used the example before, is anybody that's using an addictive substance that was using it either today, they're probably going to make their decision tomorrow. And the decision may be to use it most likely. And the good, bad, or indifferent, I don't think it's about having the war on drugs anymore, too. And matter of fact, I think the last thing we need is more wars, or at least to uphold more wars, even if they're on the home front. So I think it's more about more dangerous things than drugs and guns. And to be able to see that if it is a problem, great, then look into it. I've mentioned it on some other prior podcast. I don't even remember which one. But I remember when I was in nursing school, I came across, there was an individual It was an ER doctor, and they were fed up with having people come in with drug overdoses. With set up a booth in one of the main squares so that people could come and test their substances instead of ending up as a patient already in the EDs. That was, that's obviously didn't happen over here, but like these kinds of measures. What was the one that got me most recently was I went to the University of Akron, and now there is a vending machine not too far from the university, where it is I went, which is literally not even 10, 15 minutes from where it is I'm at. And it's a vending machine with Narcan in it. It has and various other substances that can help out with anyone in crisis. And if the crisis is drug related, okay. Not all crises are drug related too, and not all of these crises are things that you can see. So that's why they have investigative techniques. Because one of the best and worst, and I say that unfortunately to be able to talk about it, of the things that it can be a real perpetrator are us, the people, we the people, so don't forget that too. And
right.
it's our ability to be able to take stands for others.
The whole bureaucracy
and not place blame, what is so, take measures, and if nothing's wrong there, then nothing's wrong.
Bureaucracy in general, not the government, but the bureaucracy of how we do everything in general, meaning there's so much procedure and red tape to some things. It's like, why even fight the fight or even try? Because inevitably you're the 10% in this category, and the people that are really passionate and believe what they believe are true to what they believe. So it's almost a losing battle because everyone is so passionate that we don't want to have violence. We don't want to have, we don't want to keep perpetuating all these habitual things that we keep just changing slightly to make people a little bit happier. It's like, that's not creating, like, where do you put these machines, right? But in different cities, let's just use an example that like for homelessness, okay, I want to do with All Flags, part of it is to integrate community care centers that remove barriers to housing, mental health, and wellness, kind of like the model they did in Dallas with the Bridge. The Bridge is a daytime resource center that basically you can get Parkland Hospital health care. You can get mental health from, the either the, I don't know if it's the county or the city or or a sole proprietary organization.
But there's a system, right? Care. Yeah.
There's all kind of things, but that's where, like I was talking about, the evolution of All Flags kind of went from, just doing art, which, we need to have these empowering things that help people holistically, like art, music, and like play therapy, D&D, RPG therapy, gamification that we spoke of.
Right, yeah.
These things can all be healthy and unhealthy depending on a lot of different factors subjectively.
Yeah.
And so by educating, it's all about education, okay? Disseminating information and truth, and then following up with it. If you just give people a little bit of information with no understanding, too much of that will drive you crazy and make you do stupid things you wouldn't do otherwise. Let's not say stupid, let's say uninformed. I don't know. Just making bad decisions based on lack of information and knowledge.
Correct.
We have too much of that in our society because it's been this banking system of education, like Paulo Freire says, in the pedagogy of the oppressed. It's all about what I have to teach you so that I can know more than you and I can always keep you in control. That's our system of education primarily. And we're having a shift right now towards like more of in other words, like in the master's program at Tulane, it was about social work, but it was really teaching me how to teach myself or anyone else anything they need to know. And so at that point, like a Montessori, I can go as far as I want with that now because I now know how to look up knowledge and do all the things and make sure that it's the right stuff for the right reasons and show my work and get all the approvals. And, at that point, if I can't teach someone what they need to know to go forward in their life, how can I help them as a social worker? So, yeah, it was a big shift towards that, like functional restoration of things rather than rehab. But it's not rehab, it's a detox program that most people are mandated to, or they go because they feel they have to. But in all actuality, my personal experiences with that have been more harm than good.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it wasn't functional restoration, and it wasn't about me being the best version of myself. It was about me fitting into a model that they could show that they did something for whatever funding they wanted for that program. Okay, It wasn't about empowerment. It was just treating the symptoms, like we talk about the triage. The $1 Million Murray kept getting arrested in Nevada and going to the ER because he didn't go through a holistic general care, and in other words, all these things because he was homeless. But it cost the taxpayers of Nevada over $1 million for one person. Now, I could go into more statistics and more facts and figures about things I know, but I don't want to burn any bridges.
No, but I want to get in. I want to dive into that.
Let's learn from that and quit fucking spending the money on shit that isn't necessary.
Right.
That is basically just burning up resources, but helping no one except in the moment, which is likely that person, because of the non-therapeutic and non-programmatic things to help this person, it's just getting them out of the door and saying I'm a success in what I'm doing. And that's okay, because that's what's needed right now. But I think if we go holistic, we need to look at it in the future as a lot more integrative, is what I'm saying. Everyone should be working with everyone, and not keeping everyone from working with everyone. Mm-hmm. We should let the patient or the client determine what they want and how they want to get there, and then we help them get there. If it's in another state, or because they need to relocate because they were born in the wrong state and they have a different type of gift or want to do in the world, then that's not getting them off the street. It's helping them figure out, how do we retool you to be successful, so that we like we talk about the principles of being a human being, which is the 10 principles of Burning Man, plus I've added consent and self-determination, and got a couple of other ones that I think are very important that aren't in there,
Mm-hmm.
But when Larry did the 10 principles in 2004, he did it as an observation of what the community was doing on their own, not what he wanted people to do. And so all it was him saying, okay, well, people do this, we all do this. And it was a universal thing. And so that was a guide, so that it would help people that weren't educated properly by people that brought them into that world, mm-hmm. on what was already going on, and maybe things to think about, so that they could self-determine if they wanted to do that,
And we're going to see more and more of it. And we hope, and I think the system even too, more nurses than not, I mean, even other healthcare professionals too, is they want to be able to see this integration where the patient can make their choice. We're not here to say or promote drug usage, which is what I think a lot of the common narrative comes from this. But at the same time, I think there is what is so, and what it is that people want to be able to see. And honestly, here's this thing. Do you want your provider to be lied to? Do you as a provider want to be lied to in these situations because of shame or taboo on something that in other states is being innovated, is being integrated, is being given as a choice, and is a conversation? I think one of the reasons why some people don't look into these is because they're spooked. There's a lot of different stuff to be spooked about,
right.
and to be spooked about seeing and holding other people accountable because it could look and have some kind of an impact on you. And don't get me wrong, I still think there's a generation out there that they think there's a pill for everything, and instead of looking into changes in lifestyle,
the whole medicalization of the wellness,
right? And I
than
still
that
think
human-centered approach of holisticness,
correct, and still into emergency medicine. I mean, there's still again, this is all theory too, to your own research, but I still think there are things that we have that were crafted here in Western medicine that in no way, shape, or form there's any equivalent. But it still came from something of Eastern, maybe undervalued, unacknowledged, and still led to the basis of it. So there still was a basis maybe in Eastern versus Western. And then the efficacy was taken to the lab, cooked up in whatever way, whatever was undesirable was taken out of as a side effect or more, and then brought back to the system for the majority. But then the overall distribution as to what someone really needs versus what you can put onto the invoice. I have no other way to say it beyond that. What will pass, what can be coded for coding, and then in the end, there's this bill that's the overall portion too. I think this is big, and there was even an executive order signed by our current POTUS on it was on price transparency, is to acknowledge and to empower that individual patients can go in and ask those questions about this and to be educated, because that's the next part, is not just being able to go in and ask, but being able to be educated what to ask, what to audit. Because it almost seems like within healthcare, and I have no other way to say it beyond this, Ozone, is we're the self-checkout people. We're the people doing the bagging of our own goods. We're the one doing all of that for the insurances. Only, and then when the time is cleanup, say a gallon of milk or whatever it is we buy that spills, a thing of dressing or whatever it is, whether it breaks while you're checking out, then it's only in the cleanup where we notice we're the ones cleaning it up too, and not the insurance company. And we're like thinking, well, hold on now, this isn't my product. I didn't pay for this yet. This is their establishment, and I just so happen to drop the dressing, and that can happen. So, like, why am I being penalized when I'm trying to look out for me as the consumer in the end, and I'm the one footing the bill anyways? So why am I trying to connect all of you individuals and do the work, or is that the way your system is? And then that's a whole nother conversation on integrity model than the delivery of care. And honestly, and honestly,
I learned that from watching people take care of their pets. First of all,
yeah.
To learn how to take care of myself in certain ways, right? Secondly, I have a cousin that is a holistic vet that started off doing basically all Eastern veterinarian.
I'm not familiar. Yeah.
Anyway, Dr. G. She when she was in the Army, she took care of President Bush's dogs. So, like, she went into her own practice of veterinarian. Years ago doing mobile stuff, and then now she has a practice in Louisiana. But the point is that it started off being this like therapy and treatment for pets that like people really cared about and wanted to prolong their lives up to like 10 years. And that for a dog, that's a lot of years. Okay. Now, since she's opened her practice and she's married a doctor of Western medicine, she's now integrated Western into the holisticness of everything. So she took the best of the Eastern, the best of the Western, and now has this, like, to see the practice in and of itself is teaching me about how we should treat humans.
Yeah.
If it weren't based on profitability for the insurance company, basically, to tie that back in. That's,
yeah.
Like that whole, well, why are you doing acupuncture and Reiki on pets? Well, because it's holistic, and whether you believe in it or not, there's a therapeutic piece to that holistically makes the bigger picture last longer. And that's us or the animals. We'll treat our animals better than we treat ourselves. And we'll treat our animals better than we treat what we think the standard of other people should be. But realistically, that's just showing the baseline level of caring for a pet that, like, well, I want you to live long. Well, don't you want yourself and other people to live long too? I mean, like, quality of life is quality of life, however you want to look at it, from a cat, a dog, or even a human being. We're all duodemes in the biome, okay, of life. That's what kind of where my exploration stems from, that and my traveling amongst a lot of intellectual and experienced persons in many different ways of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so having all these different connections and friends has taught me a lot, because I'm very curious in my want to know things so that I can understand, so I can see things on a different picture.
Well, and I think you're up to something. I think you're up to something too. Is I still think there's healing in being able to heal. And what I mean by that is let's say that the individual you met helped out with the alternative therapies for pets, right? Let's say that they were providing all of this. Who's to say that while they're providing that, there isn't something going on we still don't know by science that's almost in a reverse happening because the healing is happening? It's almost like, I don't have to say it beyond saying it, but there's healing with it. You're healing yourself while healing others, and at the same time, it's almost like a reciprocal or symbiotic relationship. I think of the little fish in the shark's mouth, right? It doesn't eat the fish because it helps with the cleaning of the mouth, like that kind of a thing. And I wouldn't doubt if other life forms that we have this with, and we have had this presence, this connection in some way, shape, or form. Maybe we just can't see with our eyes or hear with our ears in any way, shape, or form, or feel with our hands in any way, shape, or form too. But doesn't mean that they're not there and there isn't a connection. And there isn't a correlation between that and healers and providers, both healthcare professionals and not, therefore. I believe there was, and you can look this one up, she was certified. You have to look up her name. I don't know her name. But there was an individual who could literally smell Alzheimer's on individuals. I don't know if you researched or heard anything about this. And they tested her. They did. They put her to the test, Ozone, and it worked. She literally had this rare gene that allowed her to literally smell the odor. And it makes you wonder then, it just it left me all, and I'm still going down the rabbit hole. I still am. Like, it opens up so many other doors because, again, this isn't a provider. Again, that I saw, she was not a provider, didn't go to school at all, had a loved one that had Alzheimer's, just kept having this smell.
That makes sense, though. I did some volunteering when
Yeah,
I was younger.
sure.
That was mandated.
What happened?
With an Alzheimer research and day clinic. And like I said, I'm very wanting to know why things are. And I had a lot of interactions with not only the patients, but the caregivers of the research or the facility that was doing the work with the patients. Mm-hmm. And come to find out that it's basically a buildup of aluminum on the brain. And so to me, if she was smelling something, it would probably be that aluminum coming out through secretions in the body.
So she's saying, I found it here. Okay. I found it.
Recognize that undertone of or something to that effect.
Yeah.
That is specific to Alzheimer's chemical makeup.
Mm-hmm. So her name is Joy Milne, Milne. Parkinson's is, she said, it is a musky smell, but she says Parkinson's is a musky, cancer earthy smell, and Alzheimer's smells like vanilla. This is from March 6, 2019, based off of newscientist.com. Let's see here. It was almost like a slap in the face, and I didn't like it, is what she said. But it was only 12 years later. Where's it at? She was adamant he was looking after himself properly. When no one else picked up on the smell, Joy let the matter lie. It was only 12 years later when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Who is he, though? Her husband. Okay. Let's see here. Perhaps this is experiences of synesthesia, a neurological condition in which different kinds of sensory information become mixed up. Some smells make me go cold. She has to avoid the supermarket aisle for soaps and makeups because they're too overpowering. But let's see here. What was her husband? Her husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's at only 45 years old. Ozone. 45. Yeah. Smelled funky. These are the areas of medicine. I think this is one of the reasons why I was so fascinated with health and wellness, even prior to becoming a nurse, just in general, was because there was all this stuff, and then it's like, then how does the system handle that? Because you're like, so how do you handle this smelling situation that you have to tell every other social worker about, every nurse has got to tell everybody else about? That's got to be pumped out everywhere in a note, you know?
Something that everyone has the ability to pick up on.
Correct.
Of like eating cilantro. Some people think it tastes like soap, and some people it's their,
yes, I've heard that.
favorite seasoning to eat.
Yep, there's still what we know, we know, what we know, we don't know, what we don't know, we don't know. But we know that. And if we know that, we know a lot.
Right.
But still, yeah, and across the spectrum, because I still think it's all fingerprint experiences. You know, you have still the 90-some-year-old that smokes however many cigarettes a day or packs and drinks whatever and still eats high fat or saturated fat, whatever, and still is trucking it and going out and walking however many times a day, and you ain't going to tell them otherwise, you know, and that's just it. You know, that's who they are. So, and it's not to say that you're enabling them by allowing that. It's their own choice up to a certain point too, you know. So there's distinctions, and then that's a whole other area. That's a whole other podcast is enabling. That's a whole other one. Wow, that's a whole other, a whole other one. Probably a whole other series. But I do want to reach completion here. We've mentioned a lot. If there's anything else you'd like to mention on this one, go right ahead. But I didn't know if we can. I'm gonna go ahead and give the mic over to you, and then after you declare whatever it is you want to declare, if you can go give us that empowering quote or quotes. To go ahead and bring us here, Ben, back to end this podcast here again with Ozone. And if you haven't checked out the other podcast for the Yonya Health podcast with Ozone, go ahead and check that out too. And this episode was brought to you by the BU Art Service Division. If you haven't checked them out, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, and also if you haven't gotten your taxes done, I believe it's either 44 or 45 more days until April 15th, which is why you have to have them filed. Or you have to either have an extension filed, so you can help with either Peace World Financial or Junk Powers and Associates can help with that. And again, if you can check out the other podcasts that we dropped for Empowera, there's content drop there too, and also All Flags. If you want to go ahead and send that information over too, I can drop that in the description, and people can look at whatever you have. If you do have anything to share, we can do that too. So, but yes, I'm going to go ahead and give it over to you. Give it over to you here, Ozone.
All right. Well, I think we hit on most everything that was important or imperative that were on my immediate thoughts. I do have a couple of quotes that kind of summarize this final part for me. But if we're going to talk about integrity, we have to move away from that one-size-fits-all system and towards something that's human-centered, where people are empowered to shape their own paths to healing. One of the quotes that I want to share is, "We are the ones we have been waiting for," by Hopi elders. And "Do no harm, but take no shit." At the end of the day, integrity in healthcare, wellness, and empowerment starts with us. If we all want to see real change, whether it's in our communities, our systems, or even in ourselves, we have to be willing to step up and do the work. Like Dr. Tina Thomas says, if you refuse to change your brain, you lose the right to complain. It's easy to point fingers, but real transformation happens when we take ownership of our part of the process. Gandhi said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Because when we lead by example, we create the kind of world to live in. That's empowerment in its truest form. Taking ownership of what we can change and refusing to stay passive in what we can't. That's why I always return to some fundamental truths and principles that guide my work, my life. First, the 5 agreements. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make any assumptions, and always do your best. And be skeptical, but learn to listen. These agreements are a foundation for integrity, not just in how we engage with others, but in how we align with ourselves. Beyond that, I look at the 13 principles and communal efforts of civic responsibility and self-determination. These aren't just ideas, they're tools for building a society that actually works, one that's rooted in justice, empowerment. When we live by these agreements and principles, we shift from waiting for change to being the change. I was recently selected by the Police Committee Advisory Board for the Mayor of New Orleans Office of Civic Engagement to be a member of one of the board positions. So, this is going to give me an opportunity personally to start being that bridge between the people on the street and the people that are supposed to be protecting them. We have to be willing to do the work on ourselves and the systems that we operate within holistically. That means stepping outside of our old habits, rethinking what's possible, and refusing to stay stuck. So if you take one thing away from this conversation, let it be this. Change starts with you. Be the change you wish to see in the world, because when we lead by example, we create the kind of world we actually want to live in. Namaste.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for your time and your love and your sharing. We look forward to more. Thank you again for being here with us, folks. This has been another the Empowera podcast. Thank you, Ozone. Bye for now.
Bye for now.